The massive chamber fell silent as Captain Jake Morrison stood before the 12 towering judges. Each judge represented a different alien species from across the galaxy. Their eyes, tentacles, and sensor rays all focused on the lone human in the center of the room. Jake kept his back straight and his hands behind him. He had served in the Earth Defense Force for 20 years. He had seen battles that would make most people run away screaming. But standing here, surrounded by beings who wanted to destroy his entire species, felt different. This was not a fight he could win with weapons or tactics. The lead judge was a creature made of living crystal. Its voice sounded like breaking glass when it spoke. Captain Morrison, you represent the species known as humans. Your people have been found guilty of dangerous behavior. Jake said nothing. He had learned long ago that sometimes the best response was silence. The crystal being continued. In the 50 years since first contact, your species has shown patterns that concern this council. You expand too quickly. You adapt too well. You change hostile worlds instead of finding safer ones. Another judge, this one looking like a giant jellyfish floating in a tank, pulsed with angry colors. Your military exercises are too advanced. Your technology grows too fast. Your people refuse to accept limits. Jake finally spoke. His voice was calm and steady. We survive. That is what humans do. That is exactly the problem, said a third judge that looked like a walking tree. You do not just survive. You thrive in conditions that kill other species. You make weapons from farming tools. You turn deserts into gardens. You are dangerous. The prosecutor stepped forward. Zarthek was 8 feet tall and made of the same crystal material as the lead judge. In one hand, it held a device that projected images in the air above the courtroom. Look at this evidence, Zarthek said. The device showed human colonies on different worlds. Here is the mining world of Kepler, 438b. The Zephyrian Empire abandoned this world after losing 50,000 colonists to toxic storms. Humans arrived and built underground cities. Now, they produce more rare metals than any other world in the sector. The images changed. Here is the ice world of Wolf, 359c. 3 different species tried to establish colonies here. All failed due to the extreme cold. Humans not only survived, but built geothermal power plants. Their population grows every year. More images flashed by. Each one showed humans succeeding where others had failed. Each one made the alien judges look more worried. The most disturbing example, Zarthak continued, is the desert world of Proxima b. This world was considered worthless. Nothing could grow there. The Alterian Navy used it for weapons testing. Humans arrived 5 years ago. They now export food to 12 different star systems. Jake wanted to smile, but kept his face neutral. Every example the prosecutor gave made him proud of his species. Humans did not give up. When others saw impossible problems, humans saw interesting challenges. Defense attorney Lisa Park stepped forward. She was one of only 3 humans allowed in Federation space during the trial. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun. Her suit was simple but clean. She looked tiny next to the massive alien judges. Your honors, Lisa said. The prosecution calls these traits dangerous. I call them admirable. Humans do not seek conflict. We seek solutions. Every world mentioned by the prosecution is now peaceful and productive. Peaceful for now, hissed the snake-like judge. But what happens when your species decides it wants more? What happens when you run out of empty worlds to transform? Lisa opened her mouth to respond, but the lead judge raised a crystalline hand for silence. The defense will be allowed to present its case, the crystal being said, but the evidence is clear. The human species poses a long-term threat to galactic stability. Your adaptability is unprecedented. Your aggression is barely controlled. Your expansion shows no signs of slowing. Jake felt his jaw clench. These aliens had never been hungry. They had never watched friends die because of things beyond their control. They had never had to fight for every scrap of food, every drop of water, every breath of air. Earth had taught humans hard lessons. When the Ice Age came, they learned to make fire. When the forest disappeared, they learned to farm. When diseases killed millions, they learned medicine. Every challenge made them stronger. But explaining this to beings who had never faced real hardship seemed impossible. Lisa tried anyway. Your honors, humans are not aggressive by choice. We are adaptive by necessity. Our homeworld forced us to develop these traits. We cannot simply turn them off. Which is exactly why you are dangerous, said the jellyfish judge. Its tank bubbled with agitation. Species that cannot control their nature eventually consume everything around them. The trial continued for 3 days. Lisa presented evidence of human cooperation, human art, human philosophy. She showed videos of human children playing with alien children on mixed colonies. She played recordings of human music that had become popular across 12 star systems. None of it mattered. On the final day, all 12 judges voted the same way. Guilty. The lead judge stood, its crystal body catching and reflecting the chamber's lights. The human species will be relocated to Kepler 442c. This world has been classified as a Class 0 Deathworld. It is unsuitable for any known form of life. Jake felt the words hit him like a physical blow. A Class 0 Deathworld meant a place where even the Federation's best technology could not create safe colonies. It meant a place designed to kill anything that tried to live there. All human populations will be transported within 1 galactic standard year. The judge continued. No Federation species will provide aid or assistance. No communication will be permitted. This exile is permanent. The chamber filled with the sound of alien approval. Clicks, whistles, and electronic tones mixed together in a symphony of satisfaction. The dangerous humans would be removed. The galaxy would be safe. Jake looked at Lisa. Her face was pale but determined. They had lost, but they were not defeated. Not yet. Captain Morrison, the lead judge, said, "Do you have any final words before this court?" Jake stepped forward. He thought about the 2.5 million humans scattered across Federation worlds. He thought about families that would be torn from their homes. He thought about children who would grow up on a world that wanted to kill them. But he also thought about his species. Humans had survived ice ages and plagues. They had survived wars and famines. They had turned a hostile planet into a garden once before. "We will make it work," Jake said simply. The crystal judge seemed puzzled by this response. It had expected anger or pleading. Instead, the human showed only quiet confidence. "This court is adjourned," the judge announced. As the aliens filed out of the chamber, Jake stood alone in the center of the room. Lisa walked over and put her hand on his shoulder. 2.5 million people, Jake," she whispered. "How do we save 2.5 million people?" Jake looked up at the empty judges' seats. Soon, those aliens would forget about humanity. They would go back to their safe worlds and comfortable lives. That would be their first mistake. The ground shook again. Danny Chin grabbed his tools before they could slide off the workbench and crashed to the metal floor. Around him, the atmospheric processor hummed and wheezed like a dying animal. 3 months of constant repairs had kept it running, but barely. "How bad this time?" asked his assistant Maria Santos. She was 19 years old and had learned engineering by watching Danny work. Before the exile, she had been studying art history on the colony world of New Geneva. Danny checked the readings on his tablet. The numbers made him want to throw the device against the wall. Efficiency down to 30%. The seismic activity is messing with the Foundation again. Outside their small workshop, the colony in New Haven struggled to survive another day on Kepler 442c. The planet had seemed almost normal when the first transport ships arrived 2 years ago. Green plants, blue skies, and reasonable gravity had given everyone hope. That hope lasted exactly 6 hours. The first volcanic eruption killed 12 people. The toxic rain that followed made another 100 sick. By the end of the first week, everyone understood why the Federation called this place a Class 0 Deathworld. Danny wiped sweat from his forehead and walked outside. The sky had that familiar yellow tint that meant another chemical storm was coming. In the distance, Mount Rage lived up to its name by spewing lava into the air. The humans had started naming everything on this world, mostly with angry words. New Haven sat in a valley between two mountain ranges. The location provided some protection from the worst storms, but also trapped the toxic gases that leaked from underground. Every day was a balance between staying safe from the weather and avoiding poisoned air. "Danny!" The voice came from across the settlement. Karen White jogged toward him, her boots splashing through puddles of water that might or might not be safe to drink. She was a marine biologist who had spent the last 2 years trying to understand how anything could live on this nightmare planet. "The fish are dying again," Karen said when she reached him. She was breathing hard, and her face showed the kind of worry that kept everyone awake at night. "The ones in the Eastern Lake. All of them, just like last month." Danny nodded. They had managed to catch and breed some of the local fish species. The protein was necessary since their earth crops kept failing. But every few weeks, entire populations would die for no apparent reason. "Same symptoms?" he asked. "Worse. These ones didn't just die. They sort of melted." Karen shook her head. "I've been studying biology for 15 years. I have never seen anything like the life forms on this world." They walked together toward the center town. New Haven had been built quickly using prefab modules from the transport ships. Most buildings were simple metal boxes connected by covered walkways. Everything looked temporary because nobody wanted to admit they might be here forever. Mayor Sam Johnson stood in the main square, talking to a crowd of about 50 people. He was a short man with gray hair and calloused hands. Before the Exile, he had been a construction foreman on Mars. Now he was responsible for keeping 2,847 humans alive on a planet that seemed designed to kill them. "The supply drop is 3 weeks late," Sam was telling the crowd. "We need to accept that the Federation might not send another one." A woman in the crowd raised her hand. "What about food?" "The crop report said we lost another 20% last week." "We're working on solutions," Sam replied, but Danny could hear the doubt in his voice. After the crowd broke up, Danny and Karen approached the mayor. Sam looked older than his 53 years. Leading a dying colony was not good for anyone's health. "How much food do we actually have?" Danny asked quietly. Sam looked around to make sure nobody else could hear. 6 weeks. Maybe 8 if we cut rations again." The words hit Danny like a punch to the stomach. 6 weeks. After that, people would start starving. Children would start dying. "There has to be something," Karen said. "Some resource we haven't found. Some solution we haven't tried." Danny thought about the deep caves he had been exploring. Most of the survey teams avoided them because of the toxic gases and unstable rock. But in the deepest tunnels, he had found something interesting. "There might be," he said slowly. "I found some crystal formations in the eastern caves. They seem to generate energy when exposed to electromagnetic radiation." Karen's eyes lit up. "The storms! This planet has electromagnetic storms almost every day." "Exactly. If we could harvest these crystals, we might be able to power more atmospheric processors. Maybe even some terraforming equipment." Sam frowned. "The eastern caves are dangerous. We lost 2 people there last month. We're going to lose a lot more than 2 people if we don't find new resources." Danny pointed out. Before Sam could respond, the ground shook again. This time, the tremor was strong enough to knock people down. In the distance, Mount Rage erupted with sound like thunder. Glowing rocks the size of cars flew through the air. "Storm coming too," Karen said, pointing at the sky. Dark clouds were forming with unnatural speed. Lightning flickered between them, but not the normal kind. This lightning was green and moved in spirals. The 3 of them ran for the nearest shelter as the first drops of acid rain began to fall. Around them, other colonists were doing the same thing they did every few days, hiding from their new world's attempt to murder them. In the shelter, Danny pulled out his tablet and showed Sam the cave readings. "Look at these energy signatures. Those crystals could power our entire settlement." Sam studied the data. "How dangerous would it be to mine them?" "Very, but not more dangerous than starving to death." The mayor was quiet for a long time. Outside, the storm raged with sounds like screaming metal. The shelter's walls creaked under the wind pressure. Finally, Sam spoke. "Put together a team. Volunteers only. If you can bring back enough crystals to make a difference, we'll try it. Karen volunteered immediately. So did Maria Santos and 6 other people with mining or engineering experience. They spent the next week preparing equipment and studying maps of the cave system. The morning they went into the caves, the sky was actually clear for once. Danny took it as a good sign, even though he knew better than to trust anything on this planet. The cave entrance was hidden behind a waterfall of liquid that might have been water, but smelled like sulfur. They had to wear full environmental suits just to get close to it. Inside, the caves were worse than Danny remembered. The walls seemed to move in the light from their headlamps. Strange fungi covered everything in colors that hurt to look at. The air was thick with gases that would kill them in minutes without their suits. But deeper they went, following Danny's readings toward the crystal formations. After 3 hours of careful climbing and crawling, they found them. The crystals were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. They grew in perfect geometric patterns, like someone had built a cathedral out of living electricity. When Maria's headlamp hit them, they pulsed with soft blue light. "My God!" Karen whispered over the radio. "They're alive." Danny checked his readings. The energy output was even higher than his previous measurements. These crystals could indeed power their entire settlement, maybe even help them expand it. But as they started collecting samples, the crystals began to sing. It was not a sound they could hear with their ears. It was something that went directly into their minds. A sad, lonely song about being trapped underground while the world above burned and shook. Danny realized that the crystals were not just energy sources. They were some kind of life form, maybe even intelligent, and they were as trapped on this death world as the humans were. "We take only what we need," he told his team, "and we find a way to give something back." As they loaded crystal samples into their packs, Danny made a promise to himself. Humans would not just survive on this planet. They would learn to work with it, even the parts that seemed alien and dangerous. By the time they returned to New Haven, Mount Rage was erupting again, and another storm was building on the horizon. But for the first time since the exile began, Danny felt something besides fear. He felt hope. 5 years had changed everything. Dr. Amy Foster stood in her laboratory, looking at the green shoots growing from soil that should have killed them instantly. The plants were not quite earth tomatoes, and not quite the poisonous native flora of Kepler 442c. They were something new, something that had never existed before. "The genetic integration is holding," she told her assistant, Pete Williams. He was one of the Storm children, born on this death world after the exile. At 5 years old, he could identify dangerous plants by smell and predict earthquakes hours before they happened. "They taste good, too," Pete said, munching on one of the hybrid fruits. "Not like the bitter ones from last month." Amy smiled. The Storm children were all like Pete, adapted to their environment in ways that amazed their parents. They could drink water that would poison adults. They slept peacefully during volcanic eruptions. They played games during electromagnetic storms that would kill normal humans. Outside the laboratory, New Haven had grown into something the original colonists would not recognize. Instead of hiding from the planet's dangers, the humans had learned to use them. The settlement now spread across 3 volcanic vents, using geothermal energy to power everything from lights to food processors. The buildings were no longer simple metal boxes. They were carved into the mountain itself, following the natural patterns of lava tubes and crystal formations. From the outside, the settlement looked like it had grown from the rock rather than being built on top of it. "Dr. Foster?" The voice came from the laboratory's communication system. It was Janet Reeves, who managed all long-range communications from her station deep underground. "I'm getting something strange from the Federation monitoring station." Amy walked over to the comm panel. Janet's face appeared on the screen, surrounded by banks of equipment that mixed human technology with the energy crystals Danny Chun had discovered. "What kind of strange?" Amy asked. "Distress signals. Lots of them. From all over Federation space." Janet looked worried. "It started about 3 days ago. Now I'm picking up emergency broadcasts from 12 different star systems." Amy frowned. The Federation had cut off all communication with the exile humans 5 years ago. The only reason they could monitor Federation broadcasts was because of the Storm Tech communication system Danny and his team had developed. Any details about what's causing distress? Amy asked. That's the weird part. The signals are all asking for help with something called the Void Swarm, but I can't find any information about what that is. Before Amy could respond, the ground began to shake. But this was not a normal earthquake. The shaking had a rhythm to it, like giant footsteps. That's not seismic, Pete said. He had stopped eating his hybrid fruit and was staring at the floor with the intense focus the storm children showed when danger was coming. Amy activated the settlement's emergency communication system. All units, we have unknown seismic activity. Report to stations. The response came immediately from all over New Haven. Rick Martinez, the pilot who had learned to fly through electromagnetic storms, was already in the air with his modified aircraft. I can see the source, he reported. Something big is coming up from the deep caves. How big? Amy asked. Really big, and it's bringing friends. Within minutes, everyone in New Haven could see what Rick meant. Creatures the size of small buildings were emerging from cave systems throughout the valley. They looked like a cross between giant insects and living machines. Their bodies were covered in what appeared to be metallic armor, but the armor moved like skin. Those are not native life forms. Amy said over the communication system. Everyone to defensive positions. The humans had spent 5 years preparing for threats from their adopted homeworld. They had weapons designed to work in electromagnetic storms, armor that could withstand acid rain, and tactics developed for fighting in impossible conditions. But these creatures were something new. The first one to reach New Haven was met by a team led by Colonel Steve Brooks. He had been training human soldiers in Deathworld combat techniques since the second year of Exile. His people could fight in conditions that would disable any Federation military unit. Standard formation, Steve ordered his team. Remember, we don't know what these things want. Try non-lethal first. The creature stopped about 50 yards from the settlement's main entrance. It was 30 feet tall and had too many arms, each one ending in something that looked like both a tool and a weapon. Its head was a collection of sensors and communication devices that reminded Amy of Federation technology. Then it spoke. The voice came from speakers mounted on its chest, and it spoke in perfect Federation standard. We seek the humans, it said. We bring urgent message from the deep places. Colonel Brooks approached cautiously, his weapon ready but not aimed. I'm Colonel Brooks, New Haven Defense Force. What message? The ancient enemy has returned. The devourers of worlds move again through the void. Your people in the Sky Cities are dying. Amy felt her blood turn cold. Sky Cities was how the native creatures referred to space stations and orbital colonies. What ancient enemy? She asked over the communication system. The creature's sensors focused on the speakers. You do not know the Void Swarm? The ones who consume star systems and leave only emptiness? They came before, when the first civilization ruled the galaxy. We fought them then. We lost. These are the native inhabitants, Amy realized. The intelligent species that lived here before the Federation tried to terraform the planet. We retreated deep underground when the Sky People came with their world-changing machines. The creature continued. We waited. We prepared. We thought the ancient enemy would never return. But they have returned, Colonel Brooks said. Yes, and your Sky People have no weapons that can harm them. They fight with tools designed for conquering planets, not for destroying the devourers of worlds. Amy's mind raced. The distress signals Janet had been monitoring, the emergency broadcasts from across Federation space, all made sense now. How do you know the humans can help? She asked. The creature made a sound that might have been laughter. You survived here. You made weapons from our world's anger. You turned death into life. If any Sky People can fight the devourers, it is you. Over the next several hours, more creatures emerged from the caves. They called themselves the Deep Ones, and they had been living in the planet's underground systems for millions of years. They had technologies that used the planet's hostile environment as a power source. They had weapons that could function in the chaos of space battles. Most importantly, they had fought the Void Swarm before. We can teach you to make the weapons, The first creature explained to Amy. But we cannot leave the deep places. The surface air is poison to us, and the void between worlds would kill us instantly. What do you need in return? Amy asked. Nothing. If the Devourers consume the galaxy, they will eventually come here. Better to stop them now, while allies still exist. As the sun set over New Haven, Amy stood on the settlement's highest observation deck. Around her, humans and Deep Ones worked together to unload ancient weapons and technology from the underground tunnels. Pete Williams tugged on her sleeve. Dr. Foster, are we going to help the people who sent us away? Amy looked down at the storm child. In 5 years on this death world, he had never known safety or comfort. He had been born into exile and raised under constant threat of death. But when she looked at his face, she saw no anger or desire for revenge. She saw the same curiosity and determination that had kept humanity alive through every crisis in their history. Yes, Pete, we're going to help them, even though they were mean to us. Amy smiled, especially because they were mean to us. We're going to show them what humans can do when the galaxy needs us most. In the distance, Mount Rage erupted again, painting the sky with fire. But for the first time since the exile began, Amy saw the eruption as something beautiful rather than dangerous. The galaxy had tried to destroy humanity by sending them to a death world. Instead, it had forged them into something stronger than ever before. Now it was time to go home. 10 years after the exile, New Haven was no longer a struggling colony. It was a thriving civilization that spanned 3 continents and reached deep into the planet's underground systems. Ben Taylor stood in the command center of the Deep Research Station, watching data streams flow across dozens of monitors. As chief scientist, he oversaw humanity's most ambitious projects. Today, he was about to test something that would have been impossible just 5 years ago. Storm Tech Generator at full power, reported his assistant, Carl Reed. The young man had been born on Earth, but raised on Kepler 442c. Like all the Storm children, he could work in electromagnetic conditions that would fry normal human brains. Deep crystal arrays synchronized, added Lisa Kim, the head of energy systems. She was one of the few adults who had fully adapted to the planet's hostile environment. Her hair had turned white from exposure to the planet's radiation, but her mind was sharper than ever. Initiating faster-than-light communication test, Ben announced. The generator hummed to life, drawing power from the electromagnetic storms that constantly raged in the upper atmosphere. The deep crystals, the intelligent life forms that lived in the planet's crust, pulsed with blue light as they focused the chaotic energy into a coherent beam. For a moment, nothing happened. Then every monitor in the command center lit up with data. We're receiving signals from across Federation space, Carl reported, his voice filled with excitement. Clear reception from over 200 star systems. And they can hear us, Lisa added. We just established two-way communication with the Alterian homeworld. Ben smiled, but his expression quickly turned serious as he read the incoming messages. What he saw made his blood run cold. Get me Colonel Brooks and Mayor Johnson, he ordered. Emergency meeting. Now! Within an hour, the settlement's leadership had gathered in the command center. Jake Morrison, now the colony's military commander, studied the data with the same calm focus he had shown during his trial 10 years ago. How many systems had gone dark? Jake asked. 17 confirmed, Ben replied, but the pattern suggests the number is much higher. Look at this. The main display showed a 3-dimensional map of Federation space. Red dots marked systems that had stopped transmitting. But more disturbing was the pattern. The red dots formed a rough sphere that was slowly expanding. The void swarm moves methodically, explained Dr. Kara Stone, who had been studying the ancient enemy with help from the Deep Ones. They consume everything in the star system, planets, asteroids, even the star itself. Then they move to the next system. How long before they reach the core Federation worlds? Asked Sam Johnson. The mayor had aged well during the 10 years of exile, his hair now completely gray, but his voice still strong. At their current rate of expansion, approximately 2 years, Ben answered, but that assumes they maintain the same speed. Historical data from the deep ones suggests they accelerate as they consume more resources. Colonel Steve Brooks leaned forward. What about Federation defenses? Their navy was the strongest force in the galaxy when we were exiled. Dr. Stone shook her head. The deep ones' records indicate conventional weapons are useless against a void swarm. The creatures are biomechanical entities that can adapt to any energy weapon within hours. Kinetic weapons pass right through them. Then how did anyone fight them before? Jake asked. Chaos weapons, said a new voice from the room speakers. It was Zarko, one of the deep ones who had become humanity's primary contact with the underground civilization. Weapons that use disorder as their power source. Devices that turn stability into destruction. Ben understood immediately. Storm tech weapons. We've been developing them for years without realizing their military potential. Exactly. Your species has learned to harness the power of chaos itself. This is why we sought you out. Over the next several weeks, New Haven transformed once again. The peaceful settlement became a military production center as humans and Deep Ones worked together to mass-produce chaos weapons. Rick Martinez led a team of pilots in developing new spacecraft designs. These ships could generate electromagnetic storms around themselves, making them nearly impossible to target while allowing human crews to operate normally. Dr. Amy Foster's biological research took on new urgency as she worked to understand how the void swarm entities functioned. Her hybrid organisms proved crucial in developing countermeasures against the biomechanical invaders. Meanwhile, the Storm Children revealed abilities that amazed even their parents. Billy Patterson, now 15 years old, could detect void swarm movements through space by sensing gravitational disturbances. His sister Katie had developed an intuitive understanding of chaos mathematics that helped design more effective weapons. They're not just adapted to this world. Amy told Jake one evening as they watched the children train with Deep One technology. They're adapted to fighting in impossible conditions against impossible enemies. Jake nodded grimly. The Federation tried to exile us to a world that would kill us. Instead, they created the perfect training ground for the war that's coming. The first direct contact with Federation forces came through Janet Reeves' communication array. Admiral Veltran of the Altrian Navy, the same alien who had argued for humanity's exile, sent a desperate message to anyone who might be listening. This is Admiral Veltran to any Federation vessels in range. The transmission began. The Admiral's normally perfect appearance was disheveled, his uniform torn and stained. The Proxima Centauri system has fallen. Repeat, Proxima Centauri has fallen to the Void Swarm. We are retreating to defensive positions around Sol, around the human homeworld system. Jake felt a surge of anger. Even in defeat, the aliens could not bring themselves to call Earth by name. Our weapons are ineffective, Veltran continued. Standard defense protocols have failed. We are requesting assistance from any source. Repeat, requesting assistance from any source. The message cut off abruptly. Janet tried to reestablish contact, but received only static. Sol system is under attack, Ben reported after analyzing the transmission data. The Void Swarm has reached human space. Jake stood in the command center, looking at the display showing the expanding sphere of destruction. Earth, the birth world of humanity, was about to be consumed by an ancient enemy that the Federation could not fight. For 10 years, the exiled humans had survived on a world designed to kill them. They had turned poison into medicine, chaos into power, and despair into hope. They had allied with alien intelligences that the Federation had never even known existed. Now the galaxy that had rejected them was begging for help. Begin fleet preparation, Jake ordered. All combat-ready vessels to launch positions. Deep One weapon systems to maximum production. Storm tech generators to full power. Sir, Colonel Brooks interrupted, we have fewer than 50 ships, most of them converted civilian vessels. The Federation has thousands of military ships, and they're losing. Jake smiled grimly. The Federation has thousands of ships designed to fight other Federation ships. We have 50 ships designed to fight in hell itself. He activated the colony-wide communication system. His voice reached every human settlement on Kepler, 442C, from the underground mining cities to the orbital processing stations they had built in the planet's upper atmosphere. Citizens of New Haven, this is Commander Morrison. The galaxy is under attack by an ancient enemy called a Void Swarm. The Federation, which exiled us to this world, has asked for our help. He paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. 10 years ago, they called us dangerous. They said we were too aggressive, too adaptable, too willing to fight impossible battles. Today, they're going to learn they were right. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Volunteers flooded the recruitment centers. Engineers worked double shifts to complete weapon systems. Even the Deep Ones emerged from their underground cities to help load the human ships with chaos weapons. As the fleet prepared for departure, Billy Patterson approached Jake with concerned expression on his young face. Commander Morrison, I can sense something through the void. The Void Swarm isn't just destroying systems randomly. They're heading towards something specific. What do you mean? There's a pattern in their movement. They're converging on a point in space that feels wrong, like it's calling to them. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. An ancient enemy with a specific destination meant this war was about more than just survival. It was about preventing something much worse from awakening. The Federation fleet arrived at Kepler, 442C, like a wounded animal seeking shelter. 15 ships, their hulls scarred by weapons that should not have existed, limped into orbit around the Deathworld that had once been humanity's prison. Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of New Haven's main tower, watching the alien vessels through reinforced windows that could withstand volcanic ash and electromagnetic storms. After 15 years on this hostile world, the sight of sleek Federation ships seemed almost fragile. They're requesting permission to land, reported Janet Reeves from her communication station. Admiral Veltran wants to speak with our leadership directly. Jake nodded. He had expected this moment for years, ever since the first reports of the Void Swarm reached them. The Federation had run out of options and safe harbors. Now they needed the species they had tried to destroy. Grant permission for one ship, Jake ordered. Landing Pad 7. Full escort and security protocols. As the alien shuttle descended through Kepler, 442C's hostile atmosphere, Jake thought about how much had changed since his trial. The scared refugees who had arrived here 15 years ago were gone, replaced by a civilization that had learned to thrive in impossible conditions. The shuttle landed during one of the planet's regular electromagnetic storms. Lightning danced across its hull as Federation officers emerged wearing full environmental suits. They moved carefully, obviously terrified of the world around them. Admiral Veltran was the first to remove his helmet after entering New Haven's main chamber. The Alterian had aged badly since Jake last saw him. His crystal-like skin was cracked and dull, and his movements showed the exhaustion of someone who had seen too many defeats. Captain Morrison, Veltran said, then caught himself. Commander Morrison, we need your help. Jake studied the alien who had once argued for humanity's exile. Around them, the chamber buzzed with activity as humans and Deep Ones worked together on weapon systems and ship modifications. The sight clearly disturbed the Federation delegation. You need our help, Jake repeated. The same humans you called too dangerous to exist alongside civilized species. The situation has changed, Veltran said stiffly. The Void Swarm is unlike any enemy we have faced. Our weapons are useless. Our tactics are ineffective. Entire star systems are being consumed. How many systems have you lost? Asked Dr. Amy Foster. She had joined the meeting along with the other senior leaders of New Haven. 43 confirmed, replied another Federation officer, a jellyfish-like being that Jake recognized as Commander Flux of the Zephyrian Empire. But we estimate the actual number is much higher. The Void Swarm moves faster than our communications. Danny Chin looked up from a tablet, displaying energy readings. What about the core worlds? Earth? Alteria Prime? Earth. Veltran hesitated. The Sol system is under siege. We managed to evacuate most of the orbital stations, but the planet itself... He trailed off. Jake felt his jaw clench. Earth, humanity's birth world, was under attack while the people who could help were trapped in exile. The irony was bitter and sharp. What exactly are you asking from us? Jake said, Military assistance, Veltran replied. We know you have developed new technologies here. Our long-range sensors have detected energy signatures unlike anything in Federation databases. Storm Tech, Danny explained. We learned to harness the chaos of this world and turn it into a power source. It's the only technology we've found that can disrupt void swarm entities. The Federation officers exchanged glances. They clearly had not expected the exiled humans to possess anything useful. We are prepared to offer full reinstatement of human citizenship in the Federation, Veltran announced. All charges dropped. Full access to Federation space and technology. Jake almost laughed. After 15 years of exile, you think citizenship is what we want. What do you want? Commander Flux asked. Jake looked around the chamber. Through the reinforced windows, Mount Rage was erupting again, painting the sky with fire and lightning. Storm children played in the courtyard below, laughing as they dodged electromagnetic pulses that would kill normal humans. Full Federation membership, Jake said finally. Not just citizenship. Representation in the High Council. Voting rights on all major decisions. And a guarantee that no species will ever be subjected to forced exile again. Impossible, Veltran said immediately. The High Council would never accept. Then the galaxy can burn, Jake interrupted. We've built a good life here. We have allies. He gestured toward a group of deep ones working on weapon calibrations. We can survive whatever comes next. The negotiations continued for 3 days. Jake allowed the Federation officers to tour New Haven, showing them the geothermal cities, the storm tech generators, and the hybrid organisms that thrived in toxic soil. By the second day, the aliens' arrogance had given way to amazement. By the third day, they were openly afraid. How many humans live on this world now? Asked Dr. Zint, a tree-like being who served as the Federation's chief scientist. For 0.7 million, Amy replied. The population has more than doubled since the exile. In 15 years? On a Class 0 Deathworld. Children grow up fast when they have to, Amy said simply. The breakthrough came when Billy Patterson, now 20 years old and serving as New Haven's chief navigator, demonstrated his ability to detect void swarm movements through space-time disturbances. Impossible, Dr. Zint whispered as Billy accurately predicted the arrival of 3 Federation ships hours before they appeared on sensors. How can a biological entity detect faster-than-light movements? Life finds a way, Amy said, especially when survival depends on it. On the final day, Jake presented the Federation delegation with humanity's terms. Full membership, complete with all rights and protections. Reparations for the forced exile. And most importantly, a new approach to galactic governance that valued adaptation over stability. The galaxy is changing, Jake explained. The void swarm is just the beginning. There will be other threats, other challenges. Species that refuse to adapt will not survive. And you believe humans can teach others to adapt? Veltran asked. Jake gestured toward the window, where storm children were helping deep ones install chaos weapons on a Federation ship. We've already started. The agreement was signed in New Haven's council chambers, carved into the heart of an active volcano. The setting was symbolic. Humanity had learned to build civilization inside destruction itself. As the Federation fleet prepared to depart with the first wave of human reinforcements, Admiral Veltran approached Jake privately. I owe you an apology, the Alterian said. 15 years ago, I argued that humanity was too dangerous to exist alongside other species. I was wrong. No, Jake replied. You were right. We are dangerous, but dangerous to the right enemies. The combined fleet departed Kepler. For 42C under cover of an electromagnetic storm, human storm ships leading Federation vessels through conditions that would have destroyed them just days before. Behind them, the Deathworld continued its eternal dance of fire and lightning. Now the capital of humanity's growing interstellar empire. But even as they headed toward the war zone, Jake knew the real challenge was just beginning. The void swarm was ancient and patient. Whatever had awakened them after millions of years of dormancy was still out there, waiting. And according to Billy Patterson's increasingly disturbing visions, it was getting closer. The war preparations turned New Haven into something that would have amazed the original colonists. What had once been a desperate refugee camp was now the most important military installation in the galaxy. Colonel Steve Brooks stood in the main training facility, watching Federation soldiers struggle with equipment that human children could operate easily. A Zephyr Marine was trying to use a Stormtech rifle, but the weapon's chaos-based targeting system confused him completely. "You're thinking too much," said Katie Patterson, Billy's sister. At 22, she had become New Haven's chief weapons instructor. "The rifle doesn't work like regular guns. You don't aim at where the target is. You aim at where the chaos will take it." The Zephyrian soldier, whose name was approximately Kelthara, looked frustrated. "How can I aim at something that has not happened yet?" "Feel it," Katie said simply. "The electromagnetic patterns, the gravitational fluctuations. Everything is connected. The shot exists before you pull the trigger." Steve watched the exchange with mixed feelings. The Storm Children had abilities that bordered on supernatural, at least by Federation standards. They could predict enemy movements, navigate through impossible conditions, and use weapons that required an intuitive understanding of chaos theory. But teaching these skills to aliens who had never faced real hardship was proving difficult. "How's the integration going?" asked Dr. Amy Foster as she joined Steve on the observation platform. "Slowly," Steve replied. "The Federation troops are brave enough, but they've never had to adapt to truly hostile conditions. They're used to fighting with overwhelming technological advantages." Amy nodded as she watched a group of Altrian engineers work with human technicians to modify Federation ships. The aliens were brilliant, but they thought in straight lines. Humans thought in spirals and curves, adapting to whatever worked rather than what should work. "The weapon systems are coming along better," she said. "Danny Chen's team has figured out how to retrofit Federation ships with Stormtech generators. The ships won't be as effective as our native designs, but they'll be able to use chaos weapons." Below them, a massive deep one emerged from one of the facility's underground entrances. Zarko carried what looked like a crystalline tree in his massive arms. The device pulsed with the same blue light as the energy crystals, but this one was clearly artificial. "What's he bringing up this time?" Steve asked. "Oid sensors," Amy replied. "The deep ones have been building detection equipment that can track void swarm movements across multiple star systems. They're disturbing to look at, but they work." The void sensors were indeed disturbing. They seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially somewhere else. Looking at them too long made humans feel nauseated and gave aliens severe headaches. But they could detect void swarm entities through faster-than-light travel, something no Federation technology had ever achieved. "Sir," the voice came from one of Steve's communication officers. "We're receiving a priority transmission from the front lines." Steve activated the main display, which showed the haggard face of Captain Lisa Park. She had been Jake Morrison's defense attorney during the original trial, but now she commanded one of the human scout ships operating near Void Swarm territory. "Colonel Brooks, we have a situation," Lisa reported. "We found survivors from the Kepler 186 system, but they're changed." "Changed how?" Amy asked. "See for yourself." The display switched to external cameras, showing a Federation refugee ship. At first glance, it looked normal, but as Steve watched more closely, he noticed the hull seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. "The Void Swarm doesn't just destroy," Lisa continued. "They convert. They turn matter into more of themselves, including living beings. The survivors are still technically alive, but they're part of the swarm now." Steve felt a chill run through him. An enemy that could convert its victims into more soldiers was far worse than one that simply killed them. "Any way to reverse the process?" he asked. "Unknown. The deep ones are analyzing our sensor data, but they've never seen conversion this advanced. In their previous encounters with the Void Swarm millions of years ago, converted beings were still partially themselves. These are something else." The implications were terrifying. If the Void Swarm could convert entire populations, then every system they conquered became a source of new soldiers. The enemy wasn't just consuming the galaxy, it was turning the galaxy against itself. "Update all training protocols," Steve ordered. No capture converted beings. No attempt at rescue or communication. They're no longer the species they used to be. Over the following weeks, the training intensified. Human instructors worked around the clock to teach Federation soldiers how to fight in chaotic conditions. Storm children demonstrated tactics that seemed impossible, but worked consistently. Billy Patterson had become something like a prophet among the alien troops. His ability to sense void swarm movements through space made him invaluable for strategic planning. But his predictions were becoming increasingly dark. They're not heading toward any specific target, he told Jake during one of their planning sessions. They're heading toward a convergence point in empty space. Something is calling them there. What kind of something? Jake asked. I don't know, but it's old. Older than the Deep Ones. Older than the Federation. Maybe older than any civilization in the galaxy. Danny Chen's engineering teams were making remarkable progress with weapon development. The Chaos weapons were unlike anything ever seen in galactic warfare. Instead of trying to overwhelm enemy defenses with raw power, they used unpredictability and disorder to bypass defenses entirely. Traditional shields work by creating stable energy patterns, Danny explained to a group of Federation engineers. Storm tech weapons create unstable patterns that cancel out stability. The more organized a defense, the more effective our weapons become. The Federation engineers struggled to understand the concept. They had spent centuries perfecting orderly, efficient technologies. The idea of deliberately creating chaos went against everything they believed about proper engineering. But the results spoke for themselves. In test after test, Storm tech weapons cut through Federation shields like they weren't there. More importantly, they had proven effective against void swarm entities in the few skirmishes that had occurred. Rick Martinez was training alien pilots in storm navigation, the art of flying through electromagnetic chaos without losing control or direction. The techniques required split-second decision-making and an intuitive understanding of unpredictable energy patterns. Forget everything you know about flight dynamics, he told a class of Federation pilots. In a storm, the rules change every second. You can't plan your route. You have to feel your way through. A young Alterian pilot raised a crystalline hand. But how do we navigate without instruments? The storm becomes your instrument, Rick replied. Listen to the electromagnetic fluctuations. Feel the gravitational variations. The chaos has its own patterns if you know how to read them. As the war preparations neared completion, Jake found himself standing in the same chamber where the Federation had once demanded humanity's exile. But now the chamber was filled with beings working together on the galaxy's most important mission. Humans and aliens collaborated on weapon systems that combined storm tech with Federation engineering. Deep One shared ancient knowledge with scholars who had once dismissed them as myths. Storm children taught tactics to soldiers who had never imagined such abilities were possible. Ready for departure, sir, reported Colonel Brooks. 57 ships mix human and Federation crews. Deep One weapon systems fully integrated. Storm tech generators at maximum efficiency. Jake nodded. Through the chamber's windows, he could see the fleet assembling in orbit. The ships looked different from traditional Federation vessels. More organic, more alive. They had been designed to fight in conditions that would destroy normal spacecraft. Final intelligence reports? Jake asked. The Void Swarm has consumed 68 star systems, Amy reported. But their advance is slowed. They seem to be consolidating forces around the convergence point Billy identified, which gives us a target. Jake realized. Whatever is calling them, we need to reach it first. Billy Patterson, now serving as the fleet's chief navigator, looked troubled. Commander, I need to tell you something about the convergence point. The closer we get to it, the stronger the signal becomes. And it's not just calling to the Void Swarm. What do you mean? It's calling to us too. To humans, to the Deep Ones, to every intelligent species in the galaxy. Whatever is waiting there wants all of us to come. Jake felt the familiar weight of command settle on his shoulders. 15 years ago, the Federation had tried to destroy humanity by sending them to a world of chaos and death. Instead, they had created the only force in the galaxy capable of fighting the ultimate enemy. But as the fleet prepared to depart for the most important battle in galactic history, Jake wondered if even humanity's hard-won abilities would be enough for what waited in the void. The battle at Kepler 186 began at 0347 Galactic Standard Time, when the combined Human Federation fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel and found themselves facing an enemy unlike anything in recorded history. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the flagship UHS Defiance, watching the tactical display with grim fascination. The Void Swarm had turned the entire star system into a weapon. What had once been planets were now massive biomechanical constructs that pulsed with dark energy. The star itself had been partially consumed, its light flickering like a dying candle. "Dear God," whispered Admiral Veltran from his position at the tactical station. The Altarian had requested to serve under human command, a decision that would have been unthinkable just months before. "They've transformed everything." "Not everything," corrected Billy Patterson from his position at the navigation console. His abilities had grown stronger during the journey, allowing him to see patterns in space-time that normal sensors missed. "There's something in the center, something they haven't been able to convert." Jake studied the display. At the heart of the system, where the fourth planet had once orbited, was a structure that hurt to look at directly. It seemed to exist in too many dimensions, folding in on itself in ways that made no geometric sense. "That's what's calling them," Billy continued, his voice strained. "And it's getting stronger." The first wave of Void Swarm entities approached the fleet like a living storm. They were unlike the creatures that had been reported in earlier battles. These had been evolved, perfected through the consumption of dozens of star systems, some of the size of small ships, others the size of asteroids. All of them moved with a coordination that suggested a single controlling intelligence. "All ships, engage storm protocols," Jake ordered. "Let's show them what we learned on a Deathworld." The UHS Defiance activated its electromagnetic storm generators, surrounding the ship with chaotic energy patterns that made it impossible to target accurately. Around the flagship, 56 other vessels did the same, turning the orderly Federation battle formation into a swirling maelstrom of unpredictable movement. The Void Swarm entities, accustomed to fighting predictable enemies with orderly tactics, found themselves unable to adapt. Their biomechanical systems, designed for perfect efficiency, began to malfunction in the presence of pure chaos. "Storm tech weapons charging," reported Lieutenant Carol Hayes from the weapons station. She was one of the Storm Children, raised on Kepler 442C and trained to use chaos as naturally as breathing. "All ships, fire at will," Jay commanded. The Storm tech weapons were beautiful and terrible to behold. Instead of straight energy beams, they fired spirals of controlled chaos that twisted through space in impossible patterns. When they struck Void Swarm entities, the results were devastating. The creatures' perfectly organized biomechanical systems simply came apart, unable to maintain coherence in the face of pure disorder. But the enemy adapted quickly. The remaining Void Swarm entities began to generate their own chaotic energy patterns, mimicking the Storm Tech signatures. Their learning warned Dr. Amy Foster from her position at the science station. "Evolution in real time. We need to change tactics." Colonel Brooks launched the boarding parties, Jake ordered. What followed was unlike any space battle in galactic history. Human Marines in modified environmental suits launched themselves directly at Void Swarm entities, using personal storm tech generators to survive in the chaotic energy fields around the enemy constructs. Karen White, now a full colonel, led the first boarding party against what had once been a Zephyrian battle cruiser. The ship had been converted into something that was part vessel, part living organism, part nightmare. Its corridors pulsed with biomechanical growths that tried to convert anything they touched. "Stay in formation," Karen ordered her Marines. "Remember your training. These things can only convert organized matter. Keep your thoughts chaotic." It was advice that would have made no sense to traditional military forces. But the humans had learned to fight in conditions where normal thinking could get you killed. They moved through corrupted ship with unpredictable patterns, using storm tech weapons to disrupt the conversion process. The breakthrough came when Billy Patterson detected the Void Swarm's command structure. Hidden within the twisted space-time around the central construct, invisible to normal sensors, was a network of controlling entities. "There," he said, pointing at what appeared to be empty space. "The command nexus. It's using folded dimensions to hide from our weapons. Can we target it?" Jake asked. "Not with conventional weapons. But if we can generate enough chaos in the right dimensional frequency." Danny Chen's voice came over the communication system from his position in engineering. "I can overload the storm tech generators, create a cascading chaos field that extends into higher dimensions, but will burn out our entire weapons grid." Jake didn't hesitate. "Do it." The UHS Defiance channeled every bit of power from its storm tech generators into a single, massive burst of chaotic energy. The effect was immediate and devastating. The hidden command nexus became visible as its dimensional camouflage failed, revealed as a structure that defied rational description. "All ships, concentrate fire on the nexus," Jake ordered. The combined fleet poured storm tech weapons fire into the exposed command structure. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the entire Void Swarm fleet began to convulse as the controlling intelligence was disrupted. Without central coordination, the biomechanical entities turned on each other. Perfect efficiency became perfect destruction as each creature tried to consume its neighbors to maintain system integrity. But even as the immediate battle turned in their favor, Jake knew the war was far from over. The central construct continued to pulse with malevolent energy, and new signals were appearing on long-range sensors. "More Void Swarm fleets incoming," reported Janet Reeves from communications. "At least 12 separate groups, all converging on this location." "Whatever that thing is," Amy said, staring at the impossible structure in the center of the system, "it's not going to stop calling to them." Rick Martinez, commanding the fighter squadron, reported in from near the construct. "I'm getting readings that don't make sense. That thing isn't just calling the Void Swarm, it's creating them." The revelation hit Jake like a physical blow. The construct wasn't just a beacon or a communication device. It was a factory, a source, maybe even the original creator of the Void Swarm entities. "How long before the next wave arrives?" Jake asked. 6 hours, Billy reported. "But each wave will be larger than the last. And they're bringing something else with them. Something I've never sensed before." Through the bridge's reinforced windows, Jake could see the twisted remains of what had once been a thriving star system. Somewhere out there, Earth was still under siege. Millions of Federation citizens were dying while their governments argued about jurisdiction and proper procedures. But here, in the heart of enemy territory, humanity and its allies had proven that the Void Swarm could be fought. The question was whether they could do it fast enough to save the galaxy. "Prep the fleet for continuous combat operations," Jake ordered. "Send a message to all Federation forces. We've found the source, and we're going to destroy it." As the fleet regrouped and prepared for the next wave, Jake found himself thinking about the day 15 years ago when the Federation had sentenced humanity to exile on a deathworld. They had called humans too dangerous, too adaptable, too willing to fight impossible battles. Today, those same qualities might be the only things standing between civilization and absolute destruction. The storm of war had only just begun. 5 years after the Battle of Kepler, 186, Admiral Jake Morrison stood in his office aboard New Haven Station, the mobile command center that had become the heart of the Galaxy Crisis Response Fleet. Through the massive viewing ports, he could see ships from dozens of different species conducting joint training exercises in the electromagnetic storms that the station generated for practice. The war against the Void Swarm had ended with the destruction of the central construct, but the galaxy it left behind was fundamentally changed. Humanity was no longer the exiled pariah species. They were the galaxy's premier crisis specialists, the ones other civilizations called when the impossible needed to be done. "The Andromedans are requesting assistance with their dimensional rift problem," reported Commander Lisa Park, now Jake's chief of staff. She had come a long way from being a defense attorney at humanity's trial. "Their scientists can't figure out how to close it without destabilizing their entire star system." Jake nodded. Dimensional rifts had become increasingly common since the Void Swarm's defeat. The construct destruction had caused ripples through space-time that were still being felt across the galaxy. Most species saw these anomalies as disasters waiting to happen. Humans saw them as interesting engineering challenges. Send the Chaos Core, Jake said. They've been wanting to test their new dimensional manipulation techniques. The Chaos Core was one of several specialized units that had emerged from humanity's unique approach to problem-solving. Composed of humans, deep ones, and volunteers from other species, they specialize in turning disasters into opportunities. A soft chime announced another visitor. Dr. Amy Foster entered the office, her hair now completely white, but her eyes still sharp with curiosity. As director of the Galactic Adaptation Institute, she oversaw education programs that taught other species how to thrive in hostile conditions. The Zephyrian colony on Titan 7 is ready for evaluation, she reported. 6 months of Deathworld training, and they've successfully established a sustainable settlement on a Class 2 hostile world. Jake smiled. The Zephyrians had been among the most vocal critics of humanity during the original Exile proceedings. Now they were volunteering to undergo the same kind of harsh training that had forged human resilience. Any casualties? He asked. 3 minor injuries and 1 case of homesickness. So severe we had to evacuate the colonists. Amy replied with a grin. For a species that had never experienced anything more dangerous than a mild thunderstorm, that's remarkable progress. The transformation of galactic civilization had been gradual but profound. The old Federation model of avoiding risks and maintaining stability had given way to a new philosophy that embraced challenge as a source of strength. Worlds that had been considered too dangerous for colonization were now thriving settlements. Technologies that had been deemed too unpredictable were now standard equipment. Sir, the voice came from Jake's communication system. It was Billy Patterson, now Captain Patterson, and commander of the Long-Range Reconnaissance Division. We're getting some interesting readings from a Magellanic Cloud region. Jake activated the main display, which showed a 3-dimensional map of local galactic space. Red warning indicators were blinking in an area that had been quiet since the war's end. What kind of readings? Jake asked. Similar to what we detected before the void swarm awakened, Billy replied. Something ancient stirring in the deep void. But this time it feels different. Not hostile, exactly. More like curious. Amy leaned forward, studying the data. The construct destruction might have sent signals beyond our galaxy. If there are other intelligences out there, they might be investigating what happened here. The possibility of first contact with truly alien intelligences both excited and worried Jake. Humanity had proven they could handle known threats, but completely unknown entities presented different challenges. Prep a reconnaissance mission, Jake ordered. Mix crews, full storm tech equipment, and diplomatic protocols. If something is coming to visit, we want to be ready. As Billy's image faded from the screen, Jake found himself thinking about how much had changed since that day 15 years ago when he stood trial before the Federation High Council. The humans who had been exiled as dangerous misfits had become the galaxy's protectors and teachers. Children of multiple species now played together on worlds that would have killed their grandparents. Former enemies worked side by side on projects that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. The rigid hierarchies of the old Federation had given way to fluid alliances based on capability rather than politics. Kepler, 442c, remained the symbolic heart of human civilization, but humanity itself had spread throughout the galaxy. Every major crisis response station had human advisors. Every dangerous colonization effort included human specialists. Every impossible problem eventually found its way to human engineers. Jake! Amy's voice interrupted his thoughts. There's something else we need to discuss. The children. What about them? The second-generation Storm children. The ones born after the war. They're showing abilities that go beyond what we've seen before. Jake felt a familiar chill. The Storm children had always been special, adapted to conditions that would kill normal humans. But evolution didn't stop just because the immediate crisis was over. What kind of abilities? Yesterday, young Sarah Kim predicted a solar flare 3 days before it happened. Tom Rodriguez can apparently sense faster-than-light communications before they arrive. And little Emma Chun... Amy paused. Emma Chun says she can hear the galaxy thinking. The implications were staggering. If the newest generation of humans was developing abilities that transcended normal physical limitations, what would that mean for the future of the species? Are they still human? Jake asked quietly. That depends on how you define humanity, Amy replied. They have human DNA, human emotions, human curiosity. But they're also something new, something that has never existed before in galactic history. Before Jake could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The main display automatically switched to show incoming priority communications from multiple star systems. This is Captain Rodriguez of the exploration vessel New Frontiers. Came the first message. We've discovered something in the Veil Nebula. It appears to be a derelict structure, but it's larger than anything we've ever encountered. The reading suggests it predates known civilization by millions of years. Priority message from the Altrian Science Council. Came another voice. We've detected artificial signals from beyond the galactic rim. The transmission appears to be in response to our own deep space communications. Emergency report from the Zephyrian Deep Space Observatory. Announced a third voice. Unknown vessels have been detected approaching from intergalactic space. ETA approximately 6 months. Jake looked at Amy, who was studying the incoming data with growing excitement rather than fear. It never ends, does it? He said. Would you want it to? She replied. 15 years ago, we were exiled to die on a hostile world. Today, we're the galaxy's first choice for handling the impossible. And tomorrow we face something even bigger, Jake finished. As alerts continued to pour in from across the galaxy, Jake felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. But alongside the weight was something that had sustained humanity through every crisis they had ever faced. Hope. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders that no one species could handle alone. But together, working as partners rather than competitors, they could face whatever came next. Outside the viewing ports, a new class of ships was launching from the construction bays. These vessels were unlike anything that had existed before the human exile. Hybrid designs that combined technologies from dozens of species, built to operate in conditions that would destroy traditional spacecraft. At the helm of each ship was a mixed crew trained in Deathworld survival techniques. In the navigation positions were storm children who could sense dangers and opportunities across impossible distances. In the engineering sections were beings who had learned to turn chaos into power and problems into solutions. They were heading out to investigate the new mysteries that were calling from beyond the galaxy's edge. Some would face ancient intelligences that had slept for millions of years. Others would make first contact with species that existed in dimensions humanity was only beginning to understand. All of them carried with them the lesson that had saved the galaxy once before. When faced with the impossible, adapt, survive, and turn disadvantage into strength. As Jake watched the ships disappear into faster-than-light travel, he smiled. The Federation had tried to destroy humanity by exiling them to a world of chaos and death. Instead, they had created the galaxy's greatest gift to itself. The future was uncertain, dangerous, and full of challenges that would test every species to their limits. It was going to be exactly the kind of adventure that humans were born for.